Hello, welcome or welcome back to my channel. So it's time for another round of recent reads, and this is actually slightly delayed as well. Anyway, but I got reasons for that. It's because things have been happening in my life. So basically the last 2 weeks I've been kind of busy. Okay, well, more like the first week of the last 2 weeks I was a little bit busy, but the second week I was kind of, I was sick. So last week I actually had a cold, and you may notice that my voice is a little bit different in this video. Or it might sound the same. I'm not sure how my audio system is. How well it is in capturing the nuance of my voice. But yeah, I just recovered from a minor cold, nothing too serious, but it was annoying. But the week before that, I actually had a scientific conference. It was my first conference, and I participated as a poster presenter. So I had my tiny poster at that event. And because it was my first ever conference, I didn't have much expectation from it. I was just there to kind of experience the vibe and see, what really, what really goes on at an academic conference. So it was a conference related to crystallography, which is something that is kind of related to what I'm doing right now for my research in my master's study. And I gotta be honest, it is something that is like really fresh and new to me. When I was there and I saw all these people presenting stuff related to crystallography, and I was like, I thought I was a bit out of my elements over there. It was surreal. But it was also a nice learning experience because you learned a lot of things. But yeah, for those of you who may not know, crystallography is basically just a branch of science that deals with the studies of crystal structures. So basically, so many things around us, they occur in sort of like this crystalline structure. And this is a study that kind of combines physics and chemistry and math. So it does get kind of complicated sometimes. I mean, for me, obviously, it's kind of complicated because I'm like a total noob. But yeah, it was interesting, and I don't know. Hopefully, I get to do something like that again in the future. But anyway, that was why I was kind of busy, and also I was a temp staff at that event. I was working as front desk. Like, can you imagine me as front desk? I mean, I couldn't, but I was one of the front desk members, and it was also interesting because I've never done anything like that before. I've never done anything related, very much focused on a role that is really customer facing or people facing. Even in my previous job, I was mostly doing technical things at a factory, and so my interaction with customers tend to be kind of limited and usually only relate to things that are very technical, and so I didn't have to deal so much with like being really diplomatic and stuff. But yeah, I also picked up a little bit of this and that at the time, but it wasn't like really intensive. But anyway, yeah, now I was a front desk. Anyway, so those were the things that happened in the past 2 weeks, which meant that I didn't really have the chance to do a recent reads video or any videos. And by the way, I still remember that I have 2 tag videos pending. So that is coming in the future. But anyway, let's begin the recent reads. I have 3 books, and 2 of these books are from Malaysian authors. One of them, and then another one is a memoir, so a non-fiction, very rare for me, but I feel like this is going to be a turning point in my reading life, so it's kind of momentous. But anyway, let's start with the first one. This is Children We Never Had by Nadia Khan. So Nadia Khan is a Malaysian author, and this book was published in 2023. It is published by Malaysian indie publisher Fixi. And I seldom read books published by Fixi. Like I think the last book I read was Bone Weight, the short story collection by Shih-Li, which I loved. But my previous experience with Fixi published novels have not been particularly amazing. Unfortunately. And this book was something that my sister suggested to me. So she read this book before me, and she has also read other books by Nadia Khan, and I think she liked them. But those books were written in Malay, so this book was written in English. And she did not like this. And she thought that I would also not like this, and I was kind of intrigued because she had that assumption about me, and so I was like, okay, let me just try it. And as it turned out, I did not like this. So what is this book about? This book centers around a Malaysian woman named Sabrina, but apparently she has a lot of other nicknames in this book. Abby, and I think at some point Ina or something like that. So Sabrina had just experienced a particularly traumatic event in her life that relates to childbirth. And basically this novel is about her trying to emotionally navigate the trauma of the aftermath of that particular event. It is purposely kept as a bit of a suspense, at least in the first half of the book, as to what that event is, but there is a hint as to what it is. And so because of that, I probably wouldn't want to say what it is. But anyway, it was a traumatic event for this particular character. And the way that she's coping with that event is by mainly engaging in casual relationships with different men, or even exploring the possibility of having casual relationships with various men around her. And so I thought that the premise is kind of interesting. There is so much potential for a really good story based on that premise alone, especially when it comes to that traumatic event, childbirth related traumatic event. However, I thought that the writing of this book just didn't feel very satisfactory when it comes to conveying the weight of the premise. One thing that I thought was the major flaw of this book is that there is a very strong inclination for the writing to get very edgy, for the sake of being edgy. Now, a lot of cliches are included in the writing, so a lot of Americanism especially. And to be honest, I think it is kind of fine when it comes to the inclusion of stuff like cliches and Americanism, especially Americanism, because I would say urban Malaysians, they tend to consume a lot of American media, and so Americanism is not something that is totally foreign in in among urban Malaysians at least. And this book definitely has characters that are within the environs of urban Malaysia. So it makes sense considering the kind of people, the demographics that the characters are in, and also the demographics that this book is intended for, the target audience. But I think it gets a little bit too excessive, and because of that, there is a lot of emphasis on trying to sound cool, to sound really, really hip, that those parts become really primary, and the story itself becomes secondary, because this is a book that this is a book that has a premise that I think would have benefited more from a lot of introspection. And with introspection, usually the book would become somewhat slower. But this book is really fast. The chapters tend to be short and snappy. But there are moments in this book which I think really deserve a bit of a longer kind of like reflection time, longer time for readers to churn a bit, longer time for the character themselves to really to think, for them, that kind of introspection moments in which I would say new ideas, new state of mind, new perspective can be churned out, can be synthesized. But those moments are largely absent, because whenever the main character Sabrina, gets into this part where she starts to have some reflective moments, it goes really fast, and it reverts back to that whole cliched, edgy, hip storytelling again. And so this book has a lot of action in terms of, like, not fighting actions or whatever, but actions in which it focuses mostly on what the characters do, but it doesn't focus a lot on what the characters think. And I think that is kind of like the major flaw in this book, because I really do think that this kind of story requires a lot of thinking by the character, a lot of thinking and a lot of reflecting, because it is, after all, a psychological book about a psychological experience, a psychologically affecting experience. So yeah, it didn't really work for me. I gave this one 1 out of 5 stars because it was just it could have been very visceral, it could have been really good, but it just had a lot of missed opportunities, and the end result was just very, very, very lukewarm. So yeah, unfortunately I did not like this one as well, and my sister was right. So the next one is a memoir, and this was a book that I thought is probably going to steer, or at least change a bit, the direction of my reading life, reading journey, trajectory, whatever. But anyway, this is a memoir by Xiaolu Guo. This is called 9 Continents, a memoir in and out of China. So this was a buddy read with page turners with Katya, and I enjoyed this one. I really enjoyed it. But then again, of course, I had a little bit of bias also, because I have read most of Xiaolu Guo's fiction. Her fiction that has been published in English before, I think all of them I've read, and I really enjoyed all of them. I really like her writing style. Her fictional works tend to be quite experimental when it comes to form, so I really enjoy her stuff. But this is a nonfiction, and the nonfiction is written in a somewhat more, I would say, conventional form. And this is actually, as of now, it's like it's the first book of a trilogy of her memoir. So she has two other memoirs in that series. So this is mainly about her life since she's a young girl in a fishing village in China, all the way until she's an adult living in the UK. And it basically just kind of chronicles her experience being a young girl, living with her grandmother in this really poor fishing village, really rural, in the 80s or 70s or 80s, around that time in China. And how she would eventually move to a town in China, and from there she moved to a city in China, and then after that she moved to the UK, and how her life has been changing throughout those years. And what I really like about this memoir is that there is a really strong storytelling, a very strong storytelling angle to it. Reading this memoir feels like you're also reading a novel, except that, well, it is a memoir. But when something is being reframed as the way that when something is being reframed like as if it is a novel, it means that there are certain kind of like tricks that are included in the writing of that story. And in this case, I would say the author is able to tie together a few recurrent elements that have appeared ever since she's a little girl, all the way until she's an adult, and use that element as the through line in her memoir. And I thought it's really interesting, even though the memoir spans like many years, but somehow she's able to kind of connect many elements of her life by using these particular through lines. And I would, just kind of briefly mention the through lines that I could kind of identify in this book would be her experience, her realization that there is a certain baggage involved, with her experience living as a girl and as a woman, which kind of leads her towards a more feminist outlook in her life. Another through line is also her discovery of art and how that just kind of shapes her life, and how her life shapes her approach to art. And I thought that was really interesting. Another part that I really enjoyed also, and this is mostly because I have read her novels. And so this book also mentions the context in which, behind the creation of some of her novels, especially the ones that I really enjoy, such as Concise Chinese English Dictionary for Lovers. That book has a really interesting form, and she also describes how when she was writing that book, what was happening in her life at that time, and why she decided to take a particular approach in the form of that book, based on the thing or the things, or the conditions of her life at that time. So that was really interesting. Novels such as 20 Fragments of a Ravenous Youth. That one is also kind of explored, like when and where was she at the time while she was writing it. It was just it was just really interesting because those descriptions really added onto the the layer of how I view those novels, before and after I read this memoir. So it's just really interesting, and it's very engaging, very easy to read. I would say many of the things that are written in here tend to feel kind of fast, which, I mean, probably it is going to be like that if the memoir is going to span many years. Much of the, I would say, the section in this book are written as if they're like in the form of loosely connected but chronologically arranged vignettes. So the sections aren't necessarily very tightly connected to each other, but they are sort of. But each small section, or rather subsection, they deal with a particular idea or a particular thing. So there is a bit of that, kind of like vignette style going on in this book, but it also is not like super, something I would describe as an isolated vignettes, a series of them. But yeah, so those they kind of make reading this book occasionally feels kind of clunky, and occasionally feels like really fast, like you're just really dark. What's going on? Make the reading, make the pace like really rushed sometimes, but at the same time it also feels reasonable, which is why I'm intrigued with her second and intrigued by her second and third books, because maybe those books would explore the interstitial parts of her life that weren't really explored in here. Because of how those vignettes are arranged, it feels like there are some kind of holes in between them that you could sort of detect, but you don't know how to fill in the blank, because there may be something interesting that she's keeping for other for future memoirs or something like that. But yeah, I give this one 4 out of 5 stars. Definitely I'm going to try more non-fiction later, and I feel like memoirs are going to be my gateway towards the world of non-fiction. So moving on to the last book. This is a translated fiction originally written in Malay. This is Blessed Mouse by Hassan Ibrahim, and this one was translated into English by Suzelina, Mohd, Sakian. And before I begin with this one, you might ask, why did I not read this in original Malay? Well, I did not find this book in original Malay. The first time I saw this title, it was in the it basically was this one, the translated version. And yes, I do know how to read Malay. But yeah, the funny thing is that when I saw this title, I didn't even know that this book existed. It was only after I saw this title that I knew that there was this book. The Malay title is Tikus Rahmat. So apparently this book was published in 1963, which was the year Malaysia was formed. And so this book has been around for a very long time, but the translation, I think, only existed in like 2013. Anyway, what is this book about? So this is a satirical work written in a parable or fable kind of a style. I would say it leans more towards fable because the characters are animals. So basically, this book is about how a particular locale is being dominated or overrun by a population of mice. So the mice have successfully driven away all the humans from that area. after a long time of struggle with humans, and now they're able to control that particular area. And once they're able to get that area for themselves, the mice begin to establish basically a society of mice with their own politics. So this book sort of follows how this society of mice begin to form a certain kind of social structure that involves politics and economics, and how their society just kind of evolves from there. The moment that these mice begin to have a land in which they have an autonomy over. And what's interesting about this population of mice is that there are different kinds of mice. So we have the farm mice, the valley mice, the white mice, the rats. And all of these mice, like if you kind of, you don't really have to read it really deeply to know that they are kind of stand-ins for things that are, that exist in real human society. And, because of the existence of all these different kinds of mice, we may expect some societal drama and political drama among these mice, especially once the politics between these mice have become really entangled. So the titular blessed mouse is actually referring to one particular mouse in this book, a character named Tikus Ramat. His name literally means blessed mouse. So basically he's like the main figure in this book, in which he's like the first ever leader of this population of mice. And basically it is his leadership that sort of steers the political and the destiny of this mice population, but because of certain things that are very human-like. Certain things such as corruption and greed, things that are very in line with a satirical work. The mice population is going to encounter a certain challenge. Now, I read through the reviews of this book, and and a lot of the reviews actually compared this book with Animal Farm, which, it makes sense. It kind of makes sense. But of course, the main animal in this book is just, mice. But, reading it, I would say the main similarity is simply that, both books contain animals as characters. But this one is kind of interesting because, as a Malaysian, there is something about this book that feels very, very relevant to the current time, to the current form of Malaysia. Now, I mentioned that this book was published in 1963, but while I was reading this book and, seeing all the political shenanigans that these mice get themselves into, I can't help but think of all the weird things that happened in recent Malaysian history, and by recent I mean as recent as the 2020s. And so it was very interesting that there is this kind of cyclical element, because I don't think that this book, when it was written with the intention of kind of predicting what's going to happen in the future. I believe that this book was written based on the insight that the author already had regarding the political landscape of Malaysia at that time. And basically many of the things that happened at that time can kind of mirrors whatever that is happening in here, but still whatever that is happening in this book can also mirror whatever that is happening right now in Malaysia. So I think that's kind of, it's interesting, but also kind of when you think about what's really going on in the current times, you would feel like things are happening in this really stupidly cyclical way. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And also another part that I found really nice about this book is that it actually criticizes, albeit in a very veiled way, or maybe not. I thought it was not that subtle, but some people may think it is subtle. But it also criticizes things such as, issues in Malaysian societies that are related to race and also royalty. I'm not going to say much about those things because, those are sensitive stuff and I don't really want to, talk more. But this book also touches upon ideas related to the special privilege given towards Bumiputra in Malaysia. And I thought the way that criticism was written, it was kind of obvious. Well, for me, it was kind of obvious. It was kind of heavy-handed. But at the same time, there was this kind of, I would say there's this aptness to how the allegory is being written, and so I thought that was kind of interesting also. So yeah, I think that this book should be more popular. But yeah, as it turned out, this book was not so well known, even in its Malay form. Now, I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars, and while I was really interested in the ideas that this book presented, I also thought that certain aspects of how this book is written were not particularly super amazing. Like, okay, the first one is of course the translation. Now, I could have always read the Malay version, but I haven't found the Malay version, so I read the English version. But the translation of the English version was just there were certain choices that could have been made better, such as I did not like how some of the names of the characters in this book were translated, or rather given the translation in parentheses after their names have been, after these characters are introduced for the first time. Like, perhaps using footnotes would have been a more graceful way of showing the meaning of their names. And even so, I personally think that you don't have to show the meaning of their names, because the meaning of the names, if you really want to show it, you could have done it through the portrayal of the characters. It would have been much better, instead of like just hitting our heads with parentheses, with translation of the names. I thought that was like, I got my head hit by an anvil. So that one was not particularly great. It might sound like a really nitpicky thing, but I did think that it kind of it disturbed the flow somewhat. And also, and this is just my personal taste, because I don't really jive well with novels that are written in parable or fable style, so I didn't really get along with this book at certain parts. yeah. So yeah, but then again, that is just my personal style. If you are the kind of person who likes parable like story or fable like story or allegorical story, then by all means try this book. I thought it was interesting, especially if you are interested in knowing more about Malaysian social fabric. Getting to know the, you know, the tapestry of Malaysian society. As ChatGPT would say, ChatGPT loves the word tapestry. Yeah, try this book. Definitely recommend this one. Anyway, that's all for all the books I want to talk about in this video. Now, on to the books that I'm currently reading, but before that, I will just briefly mention the books that I have finished since my last, previous recent reads. So, but these books, oh, too dark. These books I'm going to talk about in a future recent read. So the first one I finished, Manuel Puig, an Argentinian writer, and his novel Kiss of the Spider Woman. This book was originally written in Spanish, translated into English, and I love this book. I love it so much. It's so beautiful. So expect a lot of fawning in the next video. And the second book that I finished was Leïla Slimani's Lullaby. So Leïla Slimani is a French-Moroccan author, and this book was originally written in French, translated into English by Sam Taylor. This book was also quite nice. Very interesting book that explores really interesting ideas with interesting story. Yeah, with an interesting story. So these are the books that I have just finished. So on to the books that I am currently reading right now. I am still reading this one. Okay, I am making progress. I'm 25% into this book. The New Wilderness by Diane Cook. Although, I must be honest, sometimes I have been thinking about whether I should DNF this one or not. I actually have not DNF any books this year. Not that I'm against DNFing, but I feel like I want to talk about this book. But if I were to DNF this book, then, I could still talk about it, but I just don't feel like I could believe what I will say about it, So, yeah, I want to finish this book mainly because I want to talk about it. And I want to talk about it because I'm having such an experience with this book. I'm still going slow with Väinö Linna's Unknown Soldiers, translated from Finnish to English by Liesl Yamaguchi. Also going very, very slowly. I don't think I'll be able to finish this book by the end of this year, but if I could, then yay for me. This is Thomas Hardy's The Return of the Native, and also Faye Weldon's Down Among the Women. Now, as to the books that I am actively, or rather more actively engaging with right now, I got this memoir by Irina Ratushinskaya. This is called In the Beginning, The Formative Years of a Dissident Poet, translated from Russian to English by Alyona Koyennikov. And I got Frost in May by Antonia White. This is a novel. And, on top of all of the books that I have on my currently reading shelf at the moment, I just added one more. This is a translated fiction originally written in Korean. This is called Marilyn and Me, written by Jimin Lee, translated by Chiang Kim. Now let me see if I have the books that I'm still currently reading. Looks like no, I don't. But let me just end this video by saying one thing. This December, I am going to reread this book. This is The Hearing Trumpet by Leonora Carrington. And this is going to be the third year I'm reading this book, and also the second year I'm rereading it. So if you guys are interested in reading this one with me, there won't be any like strict group reads or buddy reading and stuff like that. So if you want to read this with me, it would be like reading with me in spirit. But yeah, if you guys are interested, you don't have to let me know. You can, let me know in the comments to increase my engagement or, whatever. But I am reading this one, and I'm making it a tradition, a yearly tradition for myself. And I can't wait. This book is just wow, and I can't wait to see what I will discover after rereading this book the third time. So I guess that's all for now. Thanks for watching this video. And apparently it has been like what? 41 minutes. I'm doing that because the timestamp is actually over here. So, and the background is like white. So I couldn't see it. But anyway, this video is 41 minutes. If you are still here, thank you so much for sticking around. And so for now, we'll say goodbye. I'll see you again. I don't know when. I might have another cold or something, but we'll see each other again. Okay, bye-bye. Take care. Thanks for watching.